Yeah, I had a friend that called me and told me the city had found some dead bodies. They thought it was a serial killer on the loose in Milwaukee, in this area.
He's being called the cannibal killer. Police say they're sure he killed at least 11 people and possibly as many as 18.
Confessed serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer is scheduled to appear in court today.
When I saw Jeffrey Dahmer, I got sick to the stomach because I knew I was in front of evil. I was straight facing evil. I'm like, this man right here, he's the one that killed my brother and all these other people. Him.
I should have stayed with God. I tried and failed and created a Holocaust.
Oh. I saw Satan just as clear and plain. I did. I saw his face.
What's your name,
Remember at the jail, I started giving you some creation science stuff. How come you started becoming interested in it then?
Or I felt it was hopeless. I mean, what point when I was doing what I was doing?
Lionel Dahmer was extremely religious.
You know, I really feel like I've gotten an awful lot closer to you in these later times.
He wanted Jeffrey to be saved and embrace that Christianity just like he did.
I think we're, on the same wavelength now. I mean, it's hard to imagine that afterlife, Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
But this is our only shot at it.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing is too great not to be forgiven.
Right.
God will forgive anything. Do you remember that night of Monday, July 22nd, 1991?
Yeah, what about it?
Ghastly discovery in Milwaukee today. Mutilated body parts were found in a man's apartment.
The night that Jeffrey Dahmer was arrested, I heard a knock on the door. That police knock. You know the police knock. I looked up the peephole and I saw 2 police officers. I opened the door. I said, is he okay? Excuse my language, but he said, yeah, that fucker is okay. I said, wow, what did he do? He said, well, you're gonna have to evacuate your apartment. We found hazardous chemicals, and you have to do it now.
Police were led to this West Side apartment by a man with one wrist locked in a handcuff. He told police he had been held hostage here earlier in the evening.
You remember that night with Tracy Edwards? You don't remember anything, do you?
I have no memory.
I was made aware that 2 police officers driving in District 3 in the area of 25th and Kilbourne were stopped by a man with a handcuff on one wrist. The man was Tracy Edwards. He had been invited up to someone's apartment, apartment 213. He became uncomfortable with what was going on in the apartment.
Well, I had my head turned like this, looking at the fish tank, Before I knew it, he threw a handcuff on me and had a big blade up under my heart, telling me if I don't do what he says, he's gonna kill me, So that kind of freaked me out, right? He took a blade off me for a moment, and then I knew then it was my time to make my move, that if I didn't take my chance then, I would never get out this place,
Tracy Edwards ran out and he wanted to get the handcuff off. The police officers were unable to remove it, and eventually they took Tracy Edwards back up to the apartment. The person who lived there allowed them to come in, and as they talked a little bit, one of the police officers observed some Polaroid photos. In the Polaroid photos, he appeared to be dead human beings, And at that point, he decided to call his lieutenant. We knocked on the door. There was a man on the floor. He was handcuffed, laying face down, and I looked him in the face and I says, what can I do for you? And his response, I remember it today, was, get this police officer off of me. And I looked up at the officer and he said, go look in the refrigerator. I see a human head in a small cardboard box in the bottom of the refrigerator. I remember closing the refrigerator door, turning toward the officer and saying, yeah, don't get off of him.
Well, he's 31 years old. His name is Jeff Dahmer. He seemed like a quiet man, kind of a regular guy. He was a third-shift worker at an Ambrosia chocolate factory here in town where he worked for 6 years, until sources say he was fired last week.
I liked him as my neighbor, but he started dodging me. When I knock on the door, he didn't let me in. He didn't even answer the door. So I let him alone. I stopped. I was thinking that he was a victim. And so I stood there and started talking to the officer, being friendly. And it seemed like he needed someone to talk to. So I stayed right there. And talking to him, I found out that he was the officer who found the head in the refrigerator. He said he screamed like a bitch. This was a big football player looking guy. Yeah, he said it made him scream.
That first contact visit I had with you, remember at the jail?
Yeah.
Can you remember anything particular you were thinking about?
No, that whole week I was just so numb.
Very numb, huh?
Yeah, numbness was a major emotion, I think.
It was a hot, humid July night. And at 1 o'clock, I was awakened by my daughter, who received a phone call. And the law enforcement officer only said that they had found a head in a refrigerator. I am Dr. Jeffrey Jensen. I am a forensic pathologist, and I became the chief medical examiner in Milwaukee County in 1987. Throughout my career, I've been skeptical of certain observations by, law enforcement. And so as I was getting dressed, I was probably thinking to myself, what could this be other than what they were telling me? I went to the scene, but I didn't expect to see what I saw when I got there. On a typical homicide, you've got police officers standing around and they're talking about their vacation or the baseball game or, what they were going to do after work. But in this case, you could see that each person was having their own trouble trying to grasp what they were seeing. When I opened the door and the refrigerator and I saw the head there, and it was somewhat deteriorating, I knew for sure that this was going to be a bizarre forensic case. And within the freezer compartment, there were sections of what looked to be human hearts in the plastic bags, and then long pieces of muscular tissue that looked anything like a steak or something you'd buy in the supermarket. And there was no other food in the house. We then went into his bedroom, and the mattress, it was basically soaked in dried blood. And there was also a bottle of ether and a bottle of chloroform, very potent and toxic anesthetics. There was also a large blue plastic container. I would say it was probably 50 gallons. And I kind of moved it, and it was heavy, and it sloshed around. I could feel quite a bit of fluid inside the container. We identified 11 people. When I was at the scene, I felt a chilling recognition that this is what evil looks like.
Neighbors called the suspect strange, a loner.
Thought he was into collecting old garbage or something. I don't know.
I didn't know much about him. I seen him a few times, and every time I seen him, he looked like he was like a whacked out type of dude.
They also tell us that they could hear sawing going on day and night. And of course, today, police have been inside of this building removing more things. Also found containers of acid and a 55-gallon drum, contents unknown.
We were all standing there very surprised, you know, at what was going on. And it was unbelievable. It was unbelievable.
How would you have spent the rest of the night if the police hadn't come?
Filling the tub of that, blue container with acid.
Mm-hmm.
16 gallons of acid.
Mm-hmm. Tracy probably would have been gone, huh?
It gave answer to the stench that we were smelling. It gave answer to the clothes that we were finding that looked at nice clothes, finding them in the trash. I mean, it answered so many questions from the people that lived in the building. What can you say? He fooled me. He fooled us all. Jeff was the person that I talked to, that was my neighbor. You know, Jeffrey Dahmer was a murderer and a serial killer.
My name is Rita Isbell. No. It's gonna be painful. It's gonna be painful. For me.
Now, we are not just praying for the Lindsay family, but for all of the families. Hearts are broken tonight.
Earl Scott Lindsay. Ooh, he was terrible. He was terrible. He was terrible. Mm-hmm. He was my baby and I loved him dearly. He had just turned 19. He left home April 7th, and Earl had gotten into an altercation as usual. And my sister got mad at him and told him he had to leave. It was warm outside. He didn't have a coat or anything when he left. But the next couple of days, it snowed, and he still hadn't showed up.
Yeah, he just went to go get a key made on April 7th, which was a Sunday, and on his way back, he just disappeared between this area, and we haven't seen him since.
Dahmer was standing inside of the doorway of the key shop, and he approached my brother. How would you like to make extra money doing odd jobs? And my brother said, sure. He said, let me go in here and get this key made. He said, you have to come back to my apartment with me for more details. That's how that took place. So all that time, he was right around the corner. He messed up when Dahmer offered him that beer. He opened it for him and he already had the pills crushed and poured it in there and gave it to my brother. Probably slammed it too.
How's the cigarette rolling going?
Pretty good. I've gotten pretty good at it.
Yeah? Do you get it pretty snug?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have one of these acrylic rollers that makes a perfect cigarette, so I don't have to do it by hand. Although if it's too tight, then you can't get a good draw from it, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Takes a little practice. I've gotten it down pat now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my big accomplishment here.
The first thing Dahmer said to me is, kill me for what I did. I want to die. My name is Dennis Murphy, and I was one of the detectives that interviewed Jeffrey Dahmer in 1991. After he told me I should kill him for what he did, I realized that he may want to talk about it and he may not. But my job was to get him to talk about it and get as much information I could. So we had to devise a way to get him to speak with us, and we used coffee and cigarettes. He had a cigarette habit, and once we gave him cigarettes, it says, we want to please him, now you got to reciprocate and give us some information. And it worked out.
The confession, given to police hours after his arrest, outlines his alleged murder spree and what he did with his victims' bodies.
I just wanted to call and see how you were, and I know you probably had kind of a hard day today, huh?
Good. Well, we spent 4 hours of paperwork.
Oh, did you? Looks like a full-time job.
That's right, yeah.
Dahmer also reveals more about why he killed his victims, telling police because he wanted to be with them. He stated he kept the skulls of the good-looking ones because he didn't want to lose them.
So you have to go over it and just
show it if it's correct. Right, and if it isn't, then they make little changes.
It's amazing that you can remember, you know?
Yeah.
For us, this was a very unique opportunity as forensic pathologists because we had direct contact with a cooperating murderer, and we could, if we saw something, we could call the detectives back at police headquarters, and he would ask Dahmer what we were seeing, and then he would relay that information back. Well, when we first encountered the skulls, we noted that in some of the skulls there were holes that had been drilled into the skulls. In one case, there was an intact head, and I had observed a drill hole. You could see a tissue tract that looked like a needle had gone through the brain tissue. Dahmer had injected what we saw at the scene, basically bleach and other caustic materials into the brain. And so we determined that on the basis of the patchy distribution, that this was injected while the victims were still alive. He admitted that he was trying to do a lobotomy on the individuals to make them basically zombie sex slaves, is in his words.
My brother was the one that he drilled a hole in his head and put the acid in there trying to make him out of a zombie. And my brother woke up and said that he had a headache, so he knocked him out again. This time he just went ahead and strangled him. He had to kill him. Yeah, he had to kill him. So he strangled him and dismembered him. And I bleached him off, the skin off, and kept the parts that he wanted. That's what happened to him.
You remember when he had the first contact visit with you? You remember at the jail?
Right.
I started giving you some creation science stuff then.
Right.
How come you started becoming interested in it then?
Before I was wrapped up in work, and the weekend came, I was serious thought.
Mm-hmm.
I felt it was hopeless. I mean, what point was there when I was doing what I was doing? You know?
Right. I know it. But nothing, absolutely nothing is too great not to be forgiven.
Right.
God will forgive anything.
To me, the Jeffrey Dahmer story is a story that touches on the question of faith in God. I'd been preaching since 1970 for the Churches of Christ. And in 1994, I received a phone call from a friend of mine who was a minister in Milwaukee, telling me that a prisoner wanted to be baptized, and would we please find someone to baptize him? I said, sure. I never baptized anyone in a prison, but tell me what the prisoner's name is. He said, you might want to sit down for this. His name is Jeffrey Dahmer. There's an awful lot of debate on the subject of baptism. Some people think it's important, some people think it's not important. Questions in my mind arose. Why does he want to be baptized? What does he think baptism is going to accomplish? What's he hoping for? I'd never been to a jail. In fact, I'd never done this sort of stuff in my ministry. So I went to the prison, and I was quite surprised when I'm escorted down to a room, 10 feet by 12-foot room with a table and chairs around the room, and pretty soon Jeffrey Dahmer appears. He closes the door, he shakes my hand and sits down across from me. I open the conversation and say, I understand you want to be baptized. To my surprise, he starts quoting scriptures to me, scriptures that I very much recognize, scriptures about baptism.
Tell me, what are you reading then, Jeff?
Going through that biblical science book, underlining it, and Revelation verse by verse. It's incredible, really incredible. Talks about the rapture before the tribulation.
Yeah. You know, you're more knowledgeable on that than I am.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well,
I've been spending most of my time in Genesis.
And so the date was finally set for me to come in and do the baptism. I needed something deep enough that his body could be in so he could be immersed. So I called the chaplain up. He said, okay, I found a tub that we have. It was a whirlpool tub that was used for prisoners who hurt their back when they'd done things. And so we get to the place, Jeffrey's climbed to the tub, and so I say my baptismal formula. I baptize you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit for the forgiveness of your sins. And I just push his head under the water. When he came up out of the water, I said, welcome to the family of God.
Well, I tell you one thing, if anybody had said that I would be spending Saturday nights reading some of that study Bible,
Yeah.
I never would have believed that.
That's right. It's the only way he could get you there, doing it, huh?
So that's the only way it would have happened.
I guess.
It wouldn't have happened any other way, I know that for sure.
In your past state of mind, right?
Right.
Uh-huh.
It would not have happened.
I know it.
No.
And that's the way it brings me to my knees sometimes, too, when I'm thinking wrong.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I get back and I get praying to him and communicating my thoughts to him, and it just feels like I'm getting some direction.
Well, and I have you to thank for it, because I would never have gotten interested in it otherwise.
I'll tell you, that really means a lot to me. You know, I really feel like I've gotten an awful lot closer to you in these later times.
Yeah.
And I think we're, on the same wavelength now. Do you?
Yeah, I do. I think so.
Serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer is pursuing an insanity defense. He has confessed to killing and dismembering 17 people since 1978. Dahmer's lawyers say he can't be held legally responsible for the crimes, but the district attorney says it's up to the defense to prove Dahmer is insane.
There's no doubt in my mind Jeffrey Dahmer would be found guilty. So at first meeting, he said to him, Jeffrey, what do you want from me? He says, I know I hurt a lot of people, but is there anything I can do to change that? And I said, no, that's done. And I said, Milwaukee's a wonderful place, Jeffrey. It's now got a terrible black eye. And people don't understand what happened and why it happened. And unfortunately, there's not much we can do about that. But if we tell the truth about what had happened, we'll do a lot to cleanse the reputation of Milwaukee. And that will be a good rather than an evil act. So let's do that.
Mr. Dahmer, you are charged with first-degree intentional homicide, which carries a life imprisonment penalty. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir. Dahmer wanted to die. I know that because he was very disappointed when he found out that Wisconsin didn't have the death penalty anymore. Once we pled guilty, the burden shifted to me to prove that he was suffering from mental illness.
Jerry Boyle's argument was pretty simple, which was, look at all these horrible things this guy did. How can he not be crazy?
He is taking showers with 2 dead bodies in the bath that have been in there with bleach and disinfectant.
But then the prosecutor's argument right back was, yeah, but he lied, he concealed, he knew what he was doing was wrong. He knew right from wrong.
Listen to this. He stated that before going out for the evening, he generally would know whether or not he planned to commit a homicide. And before going out, he would prepare the drug by powderizing it and leaving it in a glass on the countertop of his kitchen.
What Dahmer did in these killings is he really had them planned. And it's hard in the psychiatric world to take a person who's able to plan and to suggest that that person is mentally ill.
You have the attention of a lot of people, so that will be perhaps a tool that has been put into his hands. You know, you just don't know what his plans are, but you will.
Emotions flowed nearly unchecked in a Milwaukee courtroom today as confessed serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer was sentenced. Before sentencing, both Dahmer and the families of his victims had their turn to speak.
So I'm sitting there listening to everybody else, which is making my stomach hurt.
Fortunate for you, Wisconsin doesn't ask you for what you have taken, but then you can only give once. I'm not for the death penalty, but you are a perfect candidate.
It wasn't working for me. Because how can you get up there and be so nice?
I don't even need a microphone. My name is Rita Isbell.
No, ma'am. You'll address the court first.
My name is Rita Isbell, and I'm the oldest sister of Errol Lindsay. Whatever your name is, Satan.
I kind of knew what I was going to say, but after I saw his face, oh.
I'm mad. This is how you act when you are out of control. I don't want to ever see my mother have to go through this again. Never, Jeffrey.
And the more I was talking, the angrier I got. Yes. And I thought about my brother. I was in front of evil. I was straight facing evil.
Jeffrey, I hate you, motherfucker. I hate you. This is out of control.
I saw Satan just as clear and plain. I did.
Don't fuck with me, Jeffrey. I'll kill you. God damn it. Look at me, motherfucker. I can kill you.
Concentrate,
I can kill you, motherfucker.
I have never experienced anything like that before in my life, as far as being that angry at somebody. He didn't look at me. He didn't wear his glasses on purpose because he didn't want to see any of our faces.
Don't fuck with me, motherfucker. You don't have to fuck.
Jeffrey showed no emotion of any kind from the beginning of the trial to the end of it. He was just like a statue.
It is over now. This has never been a case of trying to get free. I didn't ever want freedom. Frankly, I wanted death for myself. This was a case to tell the world that I did what I did not for reasons of hate. I hated no one. I feel so bad for what I did to those poor families, and I understand their rightful hate. I know my time in prison will be terrible, but I deserve whatever I get because of what I have done. Thank you, Your Honor, and I am prepared for your sentence, which I know will be the maximum. I ask for no consideration.
Jeffrey Dahmer is sent to a maximum security prison, Columbia Correctional Institution in Portage, Wisconsin. He was found sane on all counts. He received 941 years behind bars. We really don't hear much about him. He doesn't really interact much inside the prison because he was in solitary. Dahmer was quiet in prison as he was in life. Leave me alone, don't bother me, and just kept to himself.
Well, after I baptized Jeff, he anticipated that I would never see him again. I get a letter from Lionel Dahmer, and Lionel Dahmer is writing me a letter, please don't abandon my son. And so I wrote back to Lionel, basically said, I'm not going to give up on your son. I am committed to him. And this question of abandonment, I think, really addresses a basic need he had in his life. Because I really think if you try to explain why he did the things that he did, that's a big part of the whole story. He said to me one time, I really feel remorseful for the crimes I committed. I think I should have been put to death by the state. I said, well, I agree, you probably should have been put to death because these were death-worthy crimes. He said, well, now that I'm a Christian, he says, am I sinning by living? The fact that he asked me the question indicates to me a sincerity on his part, that he really is trying to serve God. And I think that's what his baptism was about. He wanted to have his sins washed away, and I believe that God accepted that and that God forgave him.
So you can't do all this stuff and tell me that just because you got caught and went to prison that you found God. And all of a sudden you saved, baptized, and filled with the Holy Ghost. I don't know how that worked as far as being forgiven by God. I don't even remember if he apologized to the families. I can't recall, and if he did, it went in one ear and out the other.
Jeff, tell me about, have you really thought of suicide again? Or are you...
No.
Okay, good. Don't just put that out of your mind, because that won't solve it. That'll make a bigger problem for you in the afterlife.
Right.
I mean, it's hard to imagine that afterlife, Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
But this is our only shot at it.
Yeah.
And you will do something. I mean, he has something in mind for you. You don't know what yet.
I keep hearing that from people writing letters and everything. But I wonder if it's just wishful thinking or what,
Well, in June of '94, I went to a couple of correctional facilities, and one where Dahmer was. And when I talked to Jeff, he told me he knew if he went back to general population, he would be killed. But he said he found the Lord, he was baptized, he's seen the light, and he still wanted to die for what he did. The only way he could atone for his sins.
Do you know how long it'll be before you're in general population?
No, that's up to the warden. I have no idea. I can't make any predictions.
Yeah, I mean, no one has told you anything.
No, they say things, and then it ends up that they change it. So what they say is unreliable around here.
Yeah, the ward.
Shouldn't be too much longer.
Shouldn't be?
I hope not.
Okay, I love you, buddy.
Same here.
Keep your spirits up and just keep on reading and thinking and praying. Okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
One of the most notorious serial killers in American history met his own gruesome end today. Jeffrey Dahmer, the man who strangled and dismembered 17 men, was attacked and killed in a Wisconsin prison.
Jeffrey Dahmer knew once he was going to be mixing with the general population that he wouldn't live long. He was cleaning a bathroom, and Christopher Scarver, another inmate at Columbia Correctional, grabs a barbell. He walks into the shower room, and he beat Jeffrey Dahmer to death.
He had a death wish, as long as I have known him.
I don't think he had the gumption to do it himself, although he had tried a couple of times and was unsuccessful. And I figured it was just going to be a matter of time before he would find himself in a position where he found himself today and was terminated.
I think he knew what his future was. It was over. Somebody will get to him, because there's a lot of loony people in prisons. And killing Jeffrey Dahmer would kind of make you a big shot.
When I found out what the crime scene looked like where he was murdered, there's a bloody handprint, almost like he was doing a palm print on the wall. It wasn't surprising to find out that it didn't look like he had struggled.
I really miss him. In the last year, he's turned around completely. Oh, boy.
I can't imagine that there's a day that goes by that Lionel Dahmer does not relive over and over and over what he could have done, what he should have done, how everything played out. It's sad for everybody in that family.
There's no manual that comes with kids on how to raise your children. You know, we all make mistakes. We all make mistakes. He should have been protected. You know, he was there to serve a sentence, which he didn't get to do because his life was taken. And someone loved him the same way that someone loved his victims.
What does he deserve? What he got? What he got?
I could say that I'm shocked, but I don't feel anything. I'm numb right now.
I wish he would have stayed alive and suffered. That would have killed him more than anything.
Selfishly, I wanted him to feel the pain that we all else have felt. It just seemed like somebody gave him an easy way out.
I still can't even comprehend today, you know, what he did. I certainly couldn't have seen that when we were 18 years old. And I still find it hard to believe that any human being could do that to others.
All this stuff, as I've gotten older, has gone through my head, and I'm running through the scenarios of what could have happened to those young men, and it kind of makes me sick to my stomach.
Jeff Dahmer will never leave one of those dark recesses of our brains. You don't get rid of somebody like that. You can't just block him out and say, I don't want to think about him. He's always going to be there.
The most visible reminder of Milwaukee's most horrible nightmare is coming down.
There were a lot of people that believed that the devil was at work in that space, and they didn't want that space to continue to exist.
People in Milwaukee did not want to be reminded day in and day out of the terrible tragedies that happened on that street in that apartment building.
The victims of Dahmer didn't get to say goodbye to their families. They didn't get to grow up. They didn't get to become what they thought they were going to be.